Hey there everyone, Pally here, and welcome back. It's time for another Star Citizen video, and today I want to talk to you guys about the Vanguard, in particular, the variant, the Warden. This ship, I think, is in a bit of a conundrum. Well, the whole Warden line, or whole Vanguard line, is in a little bit of a conundrum based off of this ship, and how they want to implement its design into the game. This does tie into a little bit of a larger conversation about the value of our ships. For people that have purchased the ships, obviously put real money into, be it an Aurora or on up. And this is looking more towards the higher end ones. Will they be okay with potentially, eventually, their ships being devalued or at least outclassed by the release of future ships down the line? And we're talking post-launch here, post-launch of the Persistent Universe, maybe upwards of 10 years from now, as they hopefully continue to update and develop the game, similar to EVE Online or whatever, and flesh out the fleets a lot more. I am starting off with the Warden, though, here today, and full disclosure, the Warden, for me, it's my one ship. It's my go-to ship that to me, it says Star Citizen. I imagine for a lot of people, you have a ship like this in your hangar, or one that you're considering buying, that when you saw the concept work for it, you were like, I like that ship. If I could only have one ship, this conceptually is the one I want to have. For me, that was the Warden. The Warden, everything about it, not the Warden in particular, but the Vanguard in particular, everything about it really stood out to me. I like the visual concept of it. It looks like if an F-14 Tomcat and an A-10 Warthog had a baby that turned out to be a spaceship, that would be the Warden. But I also like the design philosophy behind it, this long-range fighter. A fighter that's able to work autonomously from the fleet. It does have the ability to save. It's got the bunks inside of it. It also has the extra crew person, the gunner or whatever. You could technically use up to 3 crew on it, but it's effective with only 1 crew. All of these things conceptually work for me. This is the one ship. So this conundrum I'm talking about here might be a little more relevant to me or somebody else that really feels that way about the Vanguard than it is for a lot of people. But as I said a moment ago, this does tie into a larger conversation we'll get in towards the end of this video. So the conundrum they're in has to do with where they're going to balance this ship out. And now I'm not talking each patch and are the guns strong or the guns weak, should it be able to do this? Those are things that will come. That's all work in development, work in progress. This is more of, from a standpoint of, on spreadsheet, we're looking at it, we want this ship to fill this role, how they're going to make it fit that role. And that's where the conundrum comes from. Currently, if we look at it, the most common class within the game available to us and overall is going to be the fighter. It's the single-seater fighter. Now, we have 6 of those, depending on how you look at it. I look at it, you have the Mustang, you then have the Gladius, then the Hornet, Super Hornet, Saber, and you do have the new Buccaneer. Is that 6? I don't know. I lost count. But you got like 6, 7 different fighters. Clearly, you could also throw the Avenger in there. For some people, they would consider that a fighter. There's variants of the 300 series that are fighters, but you get the point. Towards the top end of this, you have the Saber and the Super Hornet. And these kind of guys are designed or sold, pitched as the top dog fighters. They're 2 slightly different flavors of the same ice cream. That doesn't make sense, but I'm going to go with it. They're 2 different flavors of Kool-Aid. There we go. That one makes more sense. The Super Hornet is a little more tanky, a little more durable, bigger shields, less maneuverable, whereas the Saber gives up some of that durability, but tries to do so in avoiding the damage. It's more maneuverable, faster, and all of that thing. But they're both your top-end fighters. One of the elements that hold back these ships, though, and it's not a negative, but it's just a design around them, is they're going to have limited operational range. Basically, they're going to need to be refueled within a lesser amount of time than some of your other ships. So they're not going to be able to operate autonomously into deep space. They're going to need a Starfarer, a Bengal carrier, something to land on to get fuel on, or they'll need to plot routes or whatever that'll take them by refueling stations along the way, platforms, whatever it's going to be. That is where the Warden, the Vanguard Warden in particular, comes in. It's supposed to take that concept of fighter, but allow you to operate much deeper, much more on your own, more autonomously, without needing to worry about the refueling paths and refueling convoys, Starfarers, all of that type thing. Now, you might be starting to see a little bit of where I'm going to go with how this is going to work and everything. So, let's put together a hypothetical situation. Your company, your organization, whatever you're part of, has beef with another organization. And another organization just has more capital ships than you guys do. But the way they have their capital ships, you know, they're kind of towards this one location. And they have this other outpost. It's pretty far out there. It's maybe 3 hours travel out in a different direction, but it's very lightly defended. If you wanted to go and just raid this outpost, hit it quick, get out, pick a little bit of a fight, do some damage and go. Well, if you wanted to take your sabers, your super hornets, and all of those things, you would need to figure out a way of doing it. If you take a well-known route using fueling platforms, if those are monitored, you're going to be seeing, you know, they're going to see 5, 6, 10 of your ships coming through there. They're going to be able to predict where they're going. Likewise, you could load up, say, a Bengal carrier with a Starfare, and you could do some jumps out there, but those ships are big. They're going to be easily noticeable. Scan-wise, if they're paying attention, scanning things down, they'll probably detect those ships going along. And the ships themselves, the sabers, whatever, can't just fly there directly. That would be where the Warden would come in. You could take 3 of these Wardens, throw them together, send a crew out in 2 in each one, and they could fly directly there without worrying about fueling stations, without worrying about fleet backup, and just arrive on the target undetected, or less likely detected, being scanned down. Now, when you arrive, this hypothetical situation, maybe there's 5 defenders left hanging out there. We'll say 2 Super Hornets, 2 Sabers, and a Gladius. Or, you know what? Get rid of the Gladius, call it a Buccaneer. The Buccaneer is the new ship. We'll go with that. And how should this be balanced? So, should a Vanguard be able to one-on-one fight a Saber and win? Should it be able to? And we're talking, obviously, equal skill level pilots. A great pilot in one could destroy the others. That's perfectly fine. We're talking roughly equal piloting skills. How should this actually play out? Now, as I said, I'm partially biased. This is my go-to ship, but I don't have a good answer here. I really don't. I am someone that likes the Saber. In fact, I think the Saber is probably the most enjoyable flying ship right now in the game. I love how it handles, and I don't want to see the Saber weak. I don't. But at the same time, if the Vanguard Warden, if 3 of those guys can't take on at least 2-to-1 odds, right? If one Vanguard's not worth at least 2 fighters in a fight, then the Vanguard basically can't perform the role it was designed to do. If you jump out there and your 3 Vanguards get destroyed by 5 fighters without being able to do any damage, well, that means the Vanguards are unable to perform the role they were designed to without a fighter escort. So now you got to bring the convoy along anyway of the carrier and everything else in order to launch Sabers to protect the Wardens, which aren't supposed to need to be protected. It's not an easy thing for them to do. So on one hand, they could very easily, they could make the Warden really awesome, and it would be able to go toe-to-toe, and an equal pilot and a Warden with an equal pilot and a Saber, the Warden would have maybe a slight advantage, or it would be 50-50 depending on the skill of the pilot. If they do that, though, you're going to have a bunch of Saber pilots, Super Hornet pilots that are sitting there looking like, we bought top dog fighters. We dropped $160, $170 for these things, and now there's a fighter out there that can go toe-to-toe with us, beat us in a one-on-one fight, and it also has better fuel range, it has a bunk bed inside of it so you can save, it has all these other things that we don't have. Yes, it's a $250 ship, but you could see where obviously there would be some really pissed off Super Hornet Saber owners because of that. If you go the other way, though, well, then the Vanguard owners are like, well, our ship can't actually perform the role it's designed to be. And you could have some pissed off Vanguard owners. It's a conundrum they're going to have to work out. I have one possible solution, but we'll come to that in a moment here. There's no easy solution for this. And this gets me to the other part of the conversation. Now, that part just focuses on the Vanguard itself, but as this game develops, if we want to see it grow, like I think most of us would, we want to see this game developed over the next 10 years. You know, hopefully within the next 2 years, the Persistent Universe launches. Maybe even within the next year, the Persistent Universe launches. And then for 8 years beyond that, they continue to develop and add content on, like a lot of MMOs have happened. Well, one of the things to doing that wouldn't just be adding planets and space stations and alien races. One of those things would be fleshing out the fleets. So say you're someone that bought, I don't know, a Caterpillar. How would you feel if you were someone that owns a Caterpillar and that was your thing, you were going to be one of those, and down the line, maybe they decide, you know what, Aegis Flight Systems is going to make their own space tractor trailer. It would make sense. You figure, you know, there's a lot of different tractor trailer manufacturers, and the Caterpillar is the only one currently that fills that role. There's ones bigger than it. There's the whole series. There's also the Merchantman, which is a little more luxury. But it would make sense that there would be another, at least one, if not 3, 4, 5 different manufactured type ships that would fill that role. Well, how would you feel if they released one that's just straight up slightly better than your ship? It can haul a little bit more cargo, is a little bit faster, or whatever it actually does. It kind of just devalued the value of your Caterpillar. If we stick with the fighter side, it would be quite logical to see down the line a Sabre Mark II, a Super Hornet Mark II, that takes the same basic concept, maybe ups the engines, increases their shields a little bit, adds another pylon under the wingtips or something, just makes them another 10% better. Doing so would actually devalue the value of your ship that you purchased initially when you backed the game, or whatever, whenever you purchased the ship. Now, personally, me, I would be okay with that, because I would much prefer them to add in ships that are more powerful and cooler and neat for me to work for than to add in something that's less interesting. You know, I don't want something that's around the 300 series. I wouldn't have a problem with if them adding something around the 300 series in, but I'd be far less interested in it. If there was some new latest and greatest version of the Sabre, I'm going to work and spend my money a lot harder. And I'm talking in-game money here, the UE, the space bucks, not real-world money. I would be far more interested in getting it then than I would be a less interesting ship, something to flesh out the middle role of the roster. Same thing with the Caterpillar. If I was someone that owned a Caterpillar, and if they released something from, what was I saying, Aegis, Anvil, one of those, that filled the same role, if it wasn't as good as the Caterpillar, I'd be less interested in it. If it was better than the Caterpillar, even just slightly, well, now it's something for me to work towards, which would be good. There's not a whole lot here to talk about, I guess. It's something that I think is going to happen. If what they've currently showed us is all they plan to do with the fleets, I think the game's going to be severely lacking in some multi-role ships. I especially look at things like the Freelancer and the Cutlass. These are, to me, kind of the minivans of Star Citizen. I think they're going to be extremely common. They're enough that you can haul 2, 3, 4, 5 people plus some cargo, but they're not going to be super expensive to operate, or if you lose one, they're not going to be a super expensive loss. Those two ships, I think, fit an awesome role within the game, and they're going to be super common. And as such, I think there should probably be 4 or 5 different ones of those. I think we should have an Anvil one. I think we should have an Aegis one. I think we should have an RSI one. RSI doesn't do the Freelancer, does it? No. That's the Mushu or whatever the heck they are. I could see a bunch of 5 different ships that all fit in about that same size. That would be really cool to have, and I hope they flesh those things out. But doing so, definitely, I think it's going to step on some backers' toes, which will be unfortunate, but I think it would be for the good for it. Now, that's mainly what I want to talk about today. I'm just going to ramble for a moment about the Vanguard and how I think it could be balanced. If you don't want to care about that, well, thanks for watching. This has been Paller. Catch you next time. Those of you staying around. So here is my spitball idea of how they could do the Vanguard Warden. Well, the Vanguards in general. Right now, it's being labeled as a long-range fighter. I think you relabel it as a long-range strike craft, and you turn it into something that is designed for fighting mostly Constellations and Retaliator-sized ships. And it has to do around that main nose gun, that Vulcan cannon. That cannon is really tough to hit fighters with. When you do hit fighters, they tend to light up pretty quick on it. It does a lot of damage. But because the projectiles are relatively slow traveling, you have to get pretty darn close. And a ship that is actually maneuvering, you're maybe going to spark it with 3 to 5 rounds here, 3 to 5 rounds there. Unless they basically come to a stop or fly in a straight line, it's hard to unload a lot of those projectiles into the target. So instead, what I think they should do is they should, again, slow down the velocity of those rounds a lot, but make the rounds themselves do a lot more damage. This is going to make them less effective against fighters. but making them far more effective against larger ships that are going to be easier to line up on. This would start with the Cutlass, including the Freelancer, though those guys are kind of being in the middle. They wouldn't be easy targets, but they wouldn't also be terrible targets. They would kind of work. But things like the Constellation and the Retaliator, the Vanguard could then line up on and just lay into them with that Vulcan cannon and do a lot of damage. And they'd really have to up the damage on them, because right now the cannon does nothing to a Constellation. You have to lay into a Constellation for basically the full magazine of this thing to take down the shields. It just doesn't do enough damage. But if they did that, you could focus the Vanguard, instead of the fighters, it focuses on the medium-sized ships. Now, you would have to do some other things. You would have to buff the ship's durability, make the Vanguard basically a little tank. It's got some big engines on it. It would make sense to give it really powerful shields. So you could jump into a battle zone, focus on the Constellations, the Retaliators more so because they're more of a combat ship, have 2-3 fighters attacking you, and be able to tank up that damage for a minute or two. Unload on a Retaliator, take it out of the battle, and then fly away and still be okay because of how durable the ship is. This way the fighters are still super powerful, they still have their role. You're just kind of a hunter-killer for these medium-sized ships. This would then be carried on. The Harbinger, which is the torpedo bomber version of the Vanguard, would maybe move up another class where he focuses, while the Warden focuses on Retaliator Constellations. The Harbinger would focus on Caterpillars, Starfare, that size ship. It's just an idea. I think it could work. I think it would give a nice role to the Vanguard. The Vanguard would be more of an attack craft, kind of work alongside the gladiators and things like that. I would be okay with that, but they're going to do whatever they're going to do. Okay, so that's it. That's me gushing a little bit about the Vanguard. I love this ship. I wanted to talk about it for some time now. I just really haven't had the chance to do so until today. Until next time, though, this has been Paler. Thanks for watching.